No, you're going there.
Okay. All right, so all we do is we close the batch preprocessing script, and we go to File, Open, and go to the root directory here. And you're going to notice it created two folders, one called Calibrated and one called Logs. Okay? So PixInsight keeps a log of everything you do. It should be under the root directory. All right? And if I click on the log file, it's a log file. You can look at it within PixInsight, but it doesn't really. Yeah. You don't need to. It's there, but you can open it like in a text editor, like. Well, it's 72 kilobytes, so there's data in it.
I think it's the way you open it on a PC. It's different.
Yeah, it's 73 kilobytes.
But I guess my point was, it's there. There is a way to get to it. Believe me, I've looked at it before. So we've got this calibrated folder, right? And if you click on that calibrated folder, there's a subfolder called Lights, and that's where all your calibrated data just went to. Okay?
And it says cosmetized?
So all your calibrated data there is there, and if you notice what it did to the file name is it appended a C to each one of the files here. That means it's calibrated, okay? That's the PixInsight standard way of telling you that's a calibrated file. And then within this light folder, there's another folder called cosmetized. This data not only is calibrated, but it's been run through that cosmetic correction, and it puts a double C on those. So it's calibrated and cosmetically corrected. Okay? So that's important to understand where those two folders are, because when you do further processing in this, like we're going to register all these images, you want to pick the right ones. You don't want to just pick the calibrated ones. You want to pick the cosmetically corrected and calibrated ones. So you can, theoretically, you could go back through here and you can delete all these files if you wanted to. I normally, since memory is typically cheap these days, I typically take a whole set of data after I'm even done processing, and I save it off to like a portable hard drive that I've got several of them. You buy a 2 terabyte hard drive now for fairly inexpensively compared to what you used to be able to do. So I typically leave it there, but you have to know where to go. So that's the data we're going to work on next, and it's under that cosmetized folder. So.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Does the history of this processing get written into the FITS header?
Yes. Yes. So just open one. So I'm going to open up this red one here. All right. I just double click it.
Red or HA?
Well, whatever. It depends on how you sorted your data. You can sort it by mine is sorted by modified. You can sort it any way you want. This is just a typical Windows or Mac open dialog, which allows you to, I can sort it that way, I can sort it this way, I can sort it via. Well, because not everybody's computer is set up that way. So everybody could be a little different. It doesn't matter which one you open, okay? In this case, just pick one and just click it, double click it, and it should open up to a window here, right? On your screen. And it looks black. That's because it doesn't stretch the data for you. You're looking at it in 16-bit format, but it's not stretched at all on your screen. And if you're familiar with what I mean by stretched, your screen only has so many grayscales available to show shades of information. I think it's like 256, and the 16-bit data has 65,000 available, brightness ranges. So the way you stretch it real easy, on the Mac it's Command A, it's Control A on a Windows machine. So just hit Command A or Control A, and it's going to do an automatic screen stretch to it. All right, it's still going to look pretty dark, but it has a default setting that it uses, and if you want to change it, over here on the side under Process Explorer, okay, if you go over to this little tab here, it'll open up a menu. These are all your processes. If you go down here to Favorites, open that up, there's a function called Screen Transfer Function. And if you double click that, it opens up a little window here and allows you to stretch the information that's on the screen. And what you have to do to allow these little sliders to work is hit this checkbox, and it activates these sliders, and you can stretch you can just do a screen stretch. It doesn't affect anything, but what it does is it allows you to see, all right, what's within the information. All right, I'm just gonna, so that looks pretty ugly. Because when this particular image was taken, and it may not be the same one that you opened, there was clouds that went through, okay? So, you know, the Flame Nebula is here, and I think this is IC410 up here, is over here. Stars came in there, but, you know, this whole side of it was just messed up with clouds and light gradients, my light pollution. Because of the clouds, the sky got brighter, so where my light gradients typically are, it was even worse. So if you open up a different image, maybe you see the nebula within it. But what we're going to have to do next, we have all this calibrated data, we got to figure out, you know, which part of this information, how many of these files are good and how many are bad, you know. All we did was take what we took that night, and I didn't know clouds had gone through it, and I just calibrated it, and, you know, I may have bad files bad subs I don't want to use. So we have to look at them, and the way we look at them to decide within PixInsight if this data is good or not good is a process under the Process Explorer here.
So you want us to close the image?
Yeah, just close the image, sorry. There's a function called blink here, okay? Double click blink, and it's under favorites, yeah. Process Explorer favorites. Okay, well if you don't see it there, it may be down further, or you can go up here, process, and it would be under, let's see, I think it's under, not image. Yeah, you can go to all processes here. It's alphabetical order. That brings up a good point. Let me close this. So, that brings up a good point. The reason why under mine, now that I'm thinking about it, why I have that
Put it in there.
is because I put it in there, okay? So, under my favorites, let's see, if I want something under my favorites, it's under image inspection, okay, is where it is. If I right click on this and I say add to favorites, okay, it's already there, which is why it's grayed out. But if you click on add to favorites there, it'll move that process up into your favorites area. And that's what I did. And that's the same with any PixInsight process. You can put it within your favorites if you have a list of favorites. It gives you a default list of what the developers think should be favorites, but maybe you want to change that. That's how you do it. So, however way you get to blink, open it, and you should have that screen. And if it's not at the bottom, it's easier just to put it down at the bottom. Okay? Anybody having trouble finding it? All right. So we're going to load up our images, and the way you do that is you go down here. It's the standard file open button. You're going to click it, and now you're going to go to that cosmetized folder under the root, and then under calibrated, and then under light, and then under cosmetized. All right, there they all are. And in this case, we're going to select, say, just the reds. All right, select all your reds.
I'm sorry, I'm stretching the bottom.
Okay, so do you have Blink open?
Yes.
Okay, go down to the bottom. This is the file open button. Click that. Go to that cosmetized folder that you went to before and select all your red images, all the red ones. Should say red 1 by 1 minus 20, da 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 da. Do you see them?
These only have a C, not a CC.
You have to go to the cosmetized folder.
I didn't have it open. Got it,
Yeah.
thank you.
It'll say C_CC.
No,
All right, so just hit open down in the bottom of the dialog box, and it's going to load all those in. Okay, and if it leaves that process, if it leaves your process console open afterwards, just click in the screen someplace and it'll shut it down. It'll slide it off to the left. All right. So what it does is it opens up all your files and then it automatically stretches one, automatic screen stretch on it, so you can see the data within the file. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to click on this little icon. It looks like a histogram here. All right. And you may have to click on it twice, but what it's going to do is it's going to apply an automatic screen stretch to all the images that you just opened. So I go like this, I click on it, and now it's going to stretch all the images exactly the same way.
John, what did you just do?
I click the little histogram icon right down in the next to the window here, and if you may have to click it twice, but depending upon how you're, there you click. No,
I just clicked it
click
twice.
it. Well, if it didn't, nope. Click it again. Leave it there. It already did it to all your images. If you by accident click it a second time, like now, what it does is it goes back to
yep.
it's going to go back to back to your raw information. So all right, so you want it to auto screen stretch everything. All right. So at this point, we've got a stretched image that's open, and it's stretched all of them the same way. And what this is good for is now you can go through each image one by one and look at them to see if any of them maybe were affected by something funky like clouds. Really easy. So down here there's arrows, right? You can automatically have it automatically blink them or automatically run like every half a second or whatever you want. I like to do it manually, so I go here to this arrow and I just click the arrow and it's going to go through each image. And
Yeah, it's the third, fifth, or sixth one.
that one is messed up. That was clouds came through. You know, I do everything automated at home, so like I go to bed and it runs, and it wasn't obviously enough cloud to mess up to close my dome, but it was enough to mess up the image.
You also seem to flip though.
Well,
That's okay, it's a meridian flip.
yeah, so this is raw data, and this hasn't been aligned yet. So I did a meridian flip, and it kept on going. That's why you'll see a couple of the images are flipped upside down, like that one there. From there to there, it's 180 degrees rotated because I did a meridian flip. Can't get the screen to fit right. Click on, we'll go up, let's see, go to, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but
Now-
I'm totally lost this stuff.
Minimize it for a second. Okay, let me see your mouse for a second. There's a way that you can auto, I don't know if you have it up here. Yeah, you don't have it here. So zoom over here, zoom to fit. So you right click on the image, zoom to fit, and it'll resize the window for you.
Okay, then I just need to bring it up before, because see,
Well,
I lost this.
That's all you need to see. You don't, if you want it smaller than that, then there's a way you can make it even smaller. But zoom out. You can, if you want to go, I mean, you can.
Well, I was doing that with my mouse, but
Yeah, you can do it that, and then you hit this little button here, and what it'll do is it'll make your window
That's better.
small for you. Okay. So the idea here is you're going to click through the images, and you're going to look at which ones are bad and which ones are good. You know, maybe you got lucky and they're all good. In my case, this night they weren't all good, and there's a couple in here that were affected by clouds.
731.
So this one, 2731. That one, 2732.
Richard's working, he won't be in for a while.
Okay.
Just two.
All right, so in this case, now I had 40 red frames, okay? About 4, and each one, so you can understand my file naming convention. This is the object, this is the filter, the binning, the temperature, this is the exposure times 10 minutes, and then this is whether it's on the east side or the west side of the meridian, E or W, and then the file, you know, the unique name to that particular one. If you notice, and this brings up another good point that Denise was noticing, maybe it's not, you know, it's zoomed in too far. You see the little window down here, and it kind of shows where I'm zooming into the image. You can actually go in there and use scroll with your mouse to make the image bigger or smaller. Depends on how you want to see it. In my case, you know, I think that's okay for me, because typically, if there's clouds through it, you're going to see it in that type of view. The other thing you can notice, and it's hard up on here, but you may note, since your screen is brighter, is there's a glow on this particular image. There's a glow on that side. That's my light pollution gradient there. But anyways, this is a quick and dirty way to pick your images. And what I would do is I have a piece of paper, and I write down, that one's bad, that one's bad. I'm going to have to get rid of that. You can also click here, these little check boxes. So since I know that, let's see here, I go down to the first bad one, I can click that, uncheck it. I can click there, uncheck it. And then if I blink through them again, it doesn't include those. So say that's all my good data. I can write that data out. I can select them all. Actually, let me back up here because you have to select them. I can say, I want to select all those, and I can write those out to a totally separate subfolder. Maybe I want to call it something else, good data or something, you know, and not include those two bad ones. So it gives you a way to do that.
So you can't delete them from this link program, though?
No. You can't delete them from here. What you can do, though, there's other functions down here, and when you have time, go through some of these. You can crop them. I like this function here. It gives you you can select from the FITS header certain things, like sometimes I may want to see what elevation I took that image at. So I can select this thing, the central altitude of or the center part of the image. What was the altitude? This is 40 degrees above the horizon. It'll write a whole bunch of statistical data out for you, okay? What the mean of every image was, the median. This drives us mad. That's mean average deviation, standard deviation, the minimum and maximum. And then over here, since I clicked on the altitude, this is the altitude above the horizon that each one of those images was taken. So it gives you maybe some useful information there that you may want to use later on. But there's a way that that's how you would look at some statistics of each image if you wanted to.
When you hit blink, how did it decide which image to display initially? And I guess that image is the one that it uses to stretch out.
It was probably the first one you clicked on.
Oh, really?
You can sort it if you don't like it that way. You can, but normally it defaults to probably the first image via name. It went to the file name is what it did. So it looks like it picked this 20, I guess this is the first one, 29, then they're in order until you get down here. You know, there's a 27, 27. Maybe it picked the latest one based on when the image was taken.
So,
But you can resort that if you...
use that one to stretch all the other ones? Because, I mean, what
Yeah,
happens if that one's
right.
bad?
Yeah, good. That's a good point. So his question was, what happens if this image down here was the first one that came up? So maybe, you know, what happens if do I want to stretch all my images based on that one? Probably not. Let's see what happens when I do it. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't stretch the image.
It's going to stretch each image the same amount. If you have clouds in there, you won't see much. If there's no clouds in there, you're going to see the data.
Okay, so it simply doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't
So
matter.
you can select which one is
All right.
bad and take out the bad one.
All right, so that's the first thing I do when I go through my stuff. So I decided, you know, I don't save them out to an, I do it, we're going to do a different process here in a second, but I visually look at stuff and I write down, yeah, that one's bad, that one's bad, that one's bad, the rest are okay. Then I just close everything, which is here, this little bottom, this little X with these two file icons there. It'll shut everything out. It'll close it all. And then I open up maybe my next one. So I'll go here and I'll open up, instead of the reds, we're going to go look at the luminance data. I'm going to pick all them. And I'm going to hit open. Okay, so there's, and now I hit this histogram button one time, and it's going to stretch them all the same way. And in a minute, we'll see all our images again. And then I'll blink through these. I'll just go. So if you see the images moving back and forth there, that's dithered data. I'm dithering each image. So I take a picture, the mount automatically moves a little bit, takes another one, it automatically moves a little bit, takes another one, automatically moves a little bit. And if you don't dither your raw subframes, you should, because it makes noise rejection much more robust. The combine methods that you use, like Sigma combine, or there's several different combine methods within PixInsight or any image processing software. And if you really want to take advantage of those combined methods, you should dither your data. You can sometimes dither through your guider. In my case, I'm using an automation program called CCD Autopilot, which automatically moves my mount a little bit, bumps it between images. There's several ways to do it, but you should do it. You should learn how to do it.
How much do you do between them?
It depends on the size of your chip. I'm typically, like in CCD Autopilot, it's how many arc seconds, and I'm typically going about, I'm at 3 arc seconds per pixel, 3 point something in this data, so I'm probably going about 15 arc seconds. I want to go a couple pixels for sure.
Even in the SLR?
Probably. Depends on your pixel size and, you know, but you want to dither it. And that's that little shift that you see when you click through the images, how they kind of shift back and forth, up and down. That's what.
Satellite 28 right there?
Yeah, so in one of these here, I have a satellite or an airplane or something, you know, flew through, but that's okay. It's going to get rejected. I'm not going to throw that away.
A little bit of flare, too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one image that has,
It has two things in it, actually.
there's one image which is right there. Yeah, there's a little bit of a flare there that comes off, and I'm not sure. I'm not.
Satellite, and I don't know what the heck that is.
I bet you it was a
Airplane.
something on it that's flaring off it.
Or a pole light that had a flash.
Maybe, I don't know what that is. I never even really looked at it that hard. But there is sort of a flare there.
But no need to uncheck it.
Well,
No, we can reject it.
so in this particular image, I don't think I got rid of any of these that you're seeing right now under the luminance. I did in my big data set. I had probably 10 or 15 images of each filter that I had to get rid of. But I wouldn't necessarily dump that. That's probably okay. Because you can reject that out when you combine them. All right? So, nothing to write down there. So I'm going
The
to...
last two frames seem lighter, especially on the left-hand side.
There may have been some really faint clouds coming in.
No need to worry about that.
Well,
Yeah, we could.
it depends on how much data you have. If I only had 10 shots and I was trying to make an image for the Winter Star Party imaging contest, I'd probably say, screw it, I'm keeping that. If I've got 40 or 50 subframes, I can afford to probably get rid of 10 of them, and I'd get a lot more picky probably about what I keep. And I'm going to show you how picky I can get and how I do that after we go through this. So take a look at your HAs. These are kind of cool, just to open up all those, and
Hit the second square right here.
Second square. Yep.
With the X. All that data looks good.
all right, and then go ahead and hit the stretch all those. And then maybe blink through those. You'll see those are probably all pretty good. There's nothing.
Have to get rid of 2 images.
Oh, look at the H.
So this, the H alpha data, if you notice there on the file name, that's 1,200 seconds. That's 20 minutes. Okay. So how long you shoot your data for depends a lot on your skies, and it depends a lot on the sensitivity of your chip. Depends on a lot of things. For me, 20 minutes is basically what I have to shoot my HA data to get enough above the read noise to, if you take a couple minute HA shot, you're not going to see much. You'll see stars, but you're not going to see all this background nebulosity and stuff. So those typically are long. Especially, this is all taken one by one, by the way, so this is full resolution of the chip.
And your last frame is much lighter, but again, you wouldn't reject it even though it's cloudy.
Let's see here.
If you go back, it'll actually jump into it.
No, that's all of them right there.
Oh.
Yeah, they're all
For me, 829 seems.
28, 29.
Yeah.
Make sure you have the top one selected. Hit the, it's going to, you're going to have to hit it again. But yeah, it should stretch them all the same way. Probably somehow, for some reason, mine are all the same.
Okay, well, I didn't hit the histogram.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to run that screen stretch on them because it makes them all look the same, and then it makes it really easy for you to pick out good and bad frames, at least for clouds. And if you zoom in on your image and you blink through them, you may see some of them have a little elongation on the stars. Maybe my guiding wasn't good, or in this case these are unguided. Maybe that wasn't good. But I just wanted to show you how to do it. Okay, that's only my first step that I do.
When you say 20 minutes HA, you're saying total time.
That's a
Not the flame. You're saying 20.
No, that's a 20-minute exposure. Each one of those subframes is a 20-minute exposure. Yes. Okay, so I always do this visually first, and I write down what's good and what's bad if I can visually see it. That's my first step. Just so I'm trying to understand how many of my data frames are good or bad. Yes.
Can you compensate for 20-minute frames by doing more, twice the number of 10-minute frames? Stacking, give you the
You can, to a point. The point is you have to expose long enough to get above the read noise of your camera, which is different for every camera. You have to know your camera. That's a whole different side of imaging. But feel free, come by and talk later this afternoon. And I know Richard is very, very good at understanding how all that works. But feel free to come by and gab with us about that, and we'll be happy to talk with you. But this probably isn't the place to go through that. Okay, so I looked at the HA frames. They looked okay. I'm just going to close them. All right. So that's only step one. I could go right now and just say, hey, I'm going to go stack all my images. The best way to really do it within PixInsight, if you really want to get picky about your data, is go up here to script. Okay? Under batch processing, go all the way to the bottom, and there's a thing called subframe selector. All right? Click on that. That's going to open up a window. All right? And you probably won't have any data in this window. Okay, what this does is you can load images into this, and if you have some basic parameters about your camera, it'll go through each image and measure things. Things like full width, half max, how round are your stars, what's the median background of your image, how many stars are in your image, a whole bunch of statistical data, and then it plots it for you. So you can look at a set of data, a graph of all your full width half maxes, and you can visually, very easily see bad data that sticks out like a sore thumb. Like maybe you didn't focus, your images went out of focus, and it's a very nice visual, and then you can reject certain images and then save them automatically to a folder that I would call like my approved folder or my rejected folder. So, how do we do that? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to put in some parameters here. These are based on your camera and your system, but I gave you, in that text file, I gave you what they are, but I'm just going to tell you. Under the scale, 3.2 arc seconds per pixel, put that in there. All right. And then under the camera gain, if you haven't figured out how to figure this out yet, I would advise you to learn how to figure it out. You can typically go to the manufacturer website. They'll tell you what it is, but you really should know what your exact number is. But anyways, this is what it is for my QSI 583.472. I've got a 16-bit camera. You may not have that if you have a DSLR, maybe 12-bit. But you can hit the drop down and select 12-bit. In this case, 16-bit. I don't think this really matters. It defaults. Does it default on your screen to 24? Yeah, I would just leave it alone. For the unit, I typically have pixels selected. It does give you an option to select arc seconds. I just use pixels. And then here, data unit. This gets a lot of people confused. Well, what does that really mean? Well, DN in PixInsight just means ADU. So if you're familiar with reading information on your software that captures your images, it's the 0 to 65, 535, the 16-bit data range in analog to digital units or ADUs. PixInsight calls that DN. That's all that is. It's ADUs. Or you can have your stuff displayed in electrons if you want to do it that way. I just leave it defaulted to DN. Okay? All right, so once you have that done, if you don't have a lot of screen size, like on my big monitor, I can fit a lot of stuff on it. This one's small, so I'm just going to, up here on the sides, there's ways to open and close these sub-windows. Okay, so I'm going to close it. And I'm going to go here, add files. All right? And it should, if it doesn't default to your cosmetized folder, go to that folder where your cosmetized data is. All right? And I want you to select the reds. All right? And it's going to load all your reds in there. All right? Everybody there? Because once I hit start here, we're going to take another quick, because it's going to take me about 6 or 8 minutes for it to go through it. And it's going to come up with information, because it's going to measure each image. We're going to take a pee break or bathroom break real quick.
The bad reds too.
What's that?
We're loading the reds with clouds too.
Yes, yes. So load all those reds in there and then hit measure. At the bottom is a button called measure. If you hit reset, it'll reset everything to default. You don't want to touch that button, but hit measure. All right. So now what it's going to do is it's going to look at every one of those red images, and it's going to gather a whole bunch of statistical information on those. And while it's doing that, because I know mine's going to take a little bit. Takes about 30 seconds to a minute per image, and there's probably 10 of them. Take a quick bathroom break, and when we come back, it'll all be done.
Did you select red for a reason?
Yes. Because there's a couple of those that are bad, and I want to show people what it looks like when they're bad, how it shows up in here.
Very good.
So I guess we'll be back about noon. It's 11:50-ish right now.
Is that what for DSLR? For DSLR using that?